Thank you, Dr. Stotsky. The next speaker we have is Gage from the Department of Education, and we're going to use pretty much the same format, about 20 minutes for a presentation and then questions to follow for 10 minutes or a half an hour, however Heather would like to use it.
Good evening, everyone. So I talk a lot, so I've got a PowerPoint presentation here just so I stay on track. It's really the only reason I do this. I'm just going to set that up real quick. Okay. So I was asked to come here tonight. Every time I come to a community, I'm asked to come for different reasons. So I'm hoping that some questions will come up if I don't hit on the particular issue that you're wanting me to. But before we get started, just let me thank you so much for the opportunity to come and talk to you tonight. I love coming to communities and being engaged in the dialogue that you're having. Not so much so I can talk to you because I'm just a talking head, but so I can hear actually what your concerns are and to see how we can change our processes at the state and at the department. I know that comes as a shock to probably some of you, but we really do take that seriously. And so I'm really looking forward to some of the conversations we're going to have here tonight. So just to get started, what I want to do is set some context for the Common Core, or New Hampshire's College and Career Ready Standards is what we call them in mathematics and English language arts, and talk about some of the differences in what we're hearing from some community members, some confusion that's there, just to see if that helps with the thinking happening here. So just to get started, I just want to quickly go over, and most of the people in this room, you probably already know this, but just in case, like Dr. Stotsky was saying, you know, there's sometimes people come into a room and they may have a little bit of information, some people may have a lot. So just when it comes to standards and curriculum, Dr. Stotsky talked a little bit about this and the differences there. But standards simply state what we expect students to know and be able to do. I'm going to read all of this to you. But a lot of the concern that we hear about is actually curriculum, instructional materials, and those kinds of things. And so what I want to make sure that folks, well, we'll get to that in a second, but basically think about, this is how teachers have actually described it to me. So you're holding a roadmap, those are your standards. And driving the car is the curriculum, and maybe turning on radio shows instructional materials. I'm just being kind of silly there. Or pouring the foundation is your standards, building the house is the curriculum. So what actually happens in that classroom is what's really, really critical. And the standards, whether they're developed by the district or the school or the state, wherever it happens across the country, those are just the framework for what we start working with. So another question that I receive a lot is around why do we even have them? Besides the fact that teachers have told us over many, many years, not just me, but a variety of people, that having a framework for how we work with students is always a really good idea. Dr. Stotsky talked about how she was a leader in that work in Massachusetts and continues to be a leader in that work. And so, you know, having standards as a baseline to be able to explain what we want students to know and be able to do is always a really great thing. In New Hampshire, we're very different in a very good way than a lot of our states, including Massachusetts. So as far as our state requirements for academic standards, I'm not going to read all this to you, I promise, but if you just look at some of the red cases, this is directly from our law. This is the New Hampshire state law. So our general court, which is our legislature, requires that the State Board of Education and the Department of Education that we institute procedures for maintaining, updating, improving, and refining our curriculum frameworks, which is our academic standards. That's just what we call them here in New Hampshire. It shall serve as a guide. That's really, really important for what I'm just about to say. And it also says that the frameworks, our state academic standards, do not establish curriculum. And if you look further in the law, it's very, very clear that that is a local district responsibility and right. So let's keep going, because I know this is probably big on folks' minds when it comes to the federal government. There's nothing, you will find nothing in state law requiring the Common Core state standards. What it does require is that every state adopt challenging academic content standards. That's what it requires. What we choose to use is a local decision at the state level. To go even further in New Hampshire, as opposed to other states and states just around us, local school districts have the opportunity to look at our standards, to decide if this is what they want to be able to use in their local community, and then they have the right, you know what, this isn't good enough for us. We want to do something different that's better. They have the right to do that in New Hampshire, and we've seen that happen not only in Manchester, but in other districts as well. Okay, so I want to make sure that everybody knows that even though there are other states, specifically around us, Massachusetts being one of them, that require the state standards to be used in school districts, that's not the case here. So the fact that, I think you had a warrant, isn't that correct? You had a warrant that said, we're not going to be doing a Common Core here, we want to develop our own standards. Get your teachers in the room, get your parents in the room, have a conversation, get your experts in the community around English language arts and around mathematics, your business leaders, get them in a room together, have conversations about what that means, and develop what your standards are going to look like. That is your right. That's the responsibility of every school district to decide. Now, we do have a lot of school districts. I would say most of them have adopted the Common Core in some form or another. Some have used, I think we said earlier about Manchester, and I actually have never heard it talked about this way, but as they use the Common Core as Lord and built from there. I'm not actually sure if that's true or not, but in other school districts, they've taken pieces of it, they've kept the learning progressions, but they've gotten a little more detailed in what those standards say, and I'll show you a couple of examples of those in a minute. So it really can look different in different ways. Now, how many of you have heard of the Claremont case? Right, it's a few years ago, it's before my time, but they, what that basically said is that we have to have, at the state level, an accountability and an assessment program. So yes, if a question comes up, well, the Smarter Balanced Assessment is based on Common Core, so what if we don't do the Common Core? I think what you're going to notice is that when you look at scores of school districts who have done a little bit different, and you look at scores of those that have done the Common Core, because those that have done it a little bit different have just put more detail, maybe more rigor at the high school, and those kinds of things, that you're going to see that there isn't a lot of difference in that. That's my prediction. We don't have results yet from the first assessment, but that would be my prediction over the long term. So, but just to make sure everybody, that we're all on the same page on this, the Common Core is not required by the federal government. It never has been. Neither were our GLEs, our grade level expectations, which is what we had before. The Common Core isn't as well. So just to put this in perspective, if you think of an umbrella or a target in the middle, we have what we call the New Hampshire College and Career Ready Standards, okay? And around that, not that all of them are up to where they need to be, and I'll talk to you about science in just a second, but around that are all of our other standards that we have. So you'll see mathematics and English language arts. It's a little small, I apologize for that, but you'll see mathematics and ELA, you'll see social studies, you'll see educational technology, you'll see world languages. All of those we have curriculum frameworks or what we call academic standards in each of those areas. Each one of those we are required by our state law to have standards in those areas. So let's talk a little bit about what happened in New Hampshire when we adopted these, endorsed these at the state board level. So as you heard before with Dr. Stotsky, this process started, the conversation around it actually started probably in 2008. I was at a meeting where we started, this is when I actually lived in Arkansas. We'll have to compare notes, Dr. Stotsky, about Arkansas. But when I lived there, I was at a meeting with a lot of other state agencies, and we started talking about the need to have a common forum. We needed to have some kind of understanding across the country because we have military children. We have children that have parents that work in environments where they have to move a lot and go from state to state or town to town. So there was this strong desire to help out. And it wasn't coming necessarily from us. It was coming from teachers who were receiving these children to be able to help and support them in their learning environment. It was coming from the parents who were telling us, you know, I start my kid at first grade here, then we go to second grade, they're learning the first grade stuff that they learned before. A lot of confusion around that. So that's how that conversation got started back in 2008. I think we dabbled in the conversation for many years before that. In fact, I know we did because I was a part of it. In June of 2010, and there were actually a few times in there, June is just on that slide, but there were a couple times in there where the standards that were written were put out for public comment. About 10,000 approximately formal comments were sent in to the writers around the Common Core standards when it was in draft form. And so they used those comments, they used the comments from the feedback groups, and so forth to try and help develop what these were. In New Hampshire, we had over 200 either individuals or groups that participated in that formal process to get that information back out there. We actually had several conversations with folks that are part of different teacher organizations, content organizations like the New Hampshire Mathematics Association, the New Hampshire ELA Association, around what these standards were, what they meant, and how they could be better. So we accomplished that, and when we came back to the board, we had a lot of input into whether or not we should suggest that this be accomplished. So when they actually came before the board, there's been looking, sometimes hindsight is 2020, so when I talk about the science standards in a minute, you'll see how we've learned a lot in that process, and I see Representative Cordelli in the room, not to call you out, sir, but he's really helped us in that process as well, as thinking about those things that really help improve community engagement in this process. So we held before and after the adoption of the standards at the state level, we held many conversations with community members around this, and not only educators, but also we worked with the PTA to have conversations with parents. We worked with the higher education institutions as well as business leaders. So I also want to talk about some of the design limitations. And if you look within the standards, you'll actually see these. These are all written right there, much more lengthy than what I have up here. But I think it's important to talk about these limitations because the standards are basically a piece of paper. You know, they only come to life in a classroom, whatever standards you're using, whether it's the Northwood standards or the Manchester standards or the state standards. They're just a piece of paper until they come into the classroom and come to life. Okay, that's really, really important. But even with that, it's important to talk about what they don't define. They don't define how teachers teach. Okay, so when it comes to teachers in the classroom, and how we want them to help students become critical thinkers, that's up to the teacher in the classroom. If they want to take poetry and they want to dissect it with their students and help them with that learning process, absolutely. Why would we not want our children to experience that kind of learning? It doesn't talk about all that can or should be taught. And this is actually straight out of the standards themselves. The aim of the standards is to articulate the fundamentals, not to set an exhaustive list or set restrictions that limit what can be taught. The one thing, I know that there were conversations happening when the ELA standards were happening or being developed around having required texts in the classroom. And I can tell you right now, if that would have actually got put into the standards, New Hampshire would have never looked at that because we don't believe in requiring instructional materials in the classroom. The teacher and the schools are the best ones to determine that. So the nature of advanced work behind the Common Core. Someone you asked a question about AP. We have a lot of advanced work that's happening in school districts, and the Common Core has nothing to do with putting a cap on that. We want to make sure that kids are learning to their best potential and being able to offer that. The standards and other content areas. I think we've already covered this, but as Dr. Stotsky said, these are just ELA and mathematics standards. So we have a lot of conversations sometimes about it being science standards and social studies standards. And I think the confusion comes because if you look at the front page of the literacy standards, the ELA standards, it actually talks about literacy and the other content areas. And that is just to show how important reading really is. The interventions needed for students well below grade level. We know that some students struggle as learners. And so there's nothing in the Common Core that doesn't take away that parent, the teacher, and the student's right to have the supports needed in their educational experience. The full range of supports for English language learners, students with special needs. There's a lot of needs around that, and there's nothing in the Common Core that dictates how that should be. And then everything needed to be college and career ready. These are just standards in 2 content areas. We still need standards in other areas, but even forget about standards for a second. We need to make sure, as Dr. Stotsky said, that we have critical thinkers. And that is one of the things that I believe. I know there's argument here, but I certainly believe that the Common Core allows that to happen in the classroom. But again, that comes from the teacher and the support that's around that teacher. But all of those other things that help students, that perseverance and those kinds of things, that's what happens when you have a really supportive school environment like you have here. So just some examples, and I won't read all of these, but these are just, I literally cut and pasted them out of the standards. So in kindergarten, with prompting and support, that student should be able to identify character settings and major events in the story. Let's jump down to 11th and 12th grade. Analyze 17th, 18th, and 19th century foundational U.S. documents of historical and literary significance. And you see some of those. And analyze it for the themes, the purposes, those kinds of things. So that's what a standard is in the Common Core. But that's just some words. The teacher looks at that and says, okay, how am I going to make sure that kids can analyze this information? What kind of curriculum am I going to put behind that? What instructional materials am I going to use to support those students? So that's what that is. Let's look at math for just a second. This is not my strong suit, but. So in first grade, we want kids to add and subtract within 20. That makes sense, right? In 7th grade, represent and analyze quantitative relationships between dependent and independent variables. How students understand that happens in the classroom. So I did put up here, and if it's okay, Bob, I'm going to send you the PowerPoint, and if you want to put it up on your website or pass it out to folks at another board meeting or whatever works for you. I do have these on here so that you can click on some of the different resources. One of them, of course, is our website. Another one is the National PTA for parents in the room. They have some really great resources by grade level. So if you have a 3rd grader or a 7th grader, you can go right on there and pull information on how to help your student at those grade levels. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, if there's any business leaders in the room, they have some really good materials on there, some good videos that are quick and pithy. And then a new resource that I just found yesterday, it's called Being a Learning Hero. And I actually don't know any background on it at all, so don't put it against me. But when I was looking at it, it's just very, very simple, quick, some easy, understandable information on there around those resources. And I believe we had a privacy question before, but I don't know if this will help answer what the questions would have been. But so New Hampshire has some of the strictest, or I would say arguably, the strictest state privacy law in the country. And that's because of some of the representatives that you see in the room today. They worked very, very hard. I hope that we were supportive in that work. We believe it's really, really important to protect student privacy. In addition to that, there are also 6 federal laws. You'll hear a lot about FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and how that was watered down, if you will. And actually what happened was the federal government, because there were individuals and organizations not using data appropriately, what happened in that revision in 2011, was they clarified what could happen and what could not in that law. But even, forget about FERPA, there's other laws in there that really protect what our students can get. I actually would encourage you to look at the Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment, and I can send a copy of that as well when I send the PowerPoint. But a lot of those things that we talk about, where we hear, and I'm not sure where this comes from, but like on our statewide assessment that we're asking how many guns you have in your house, or very personal information that I won't say on video cameras. I don't care about that. I absolutely don't care. I care if your student, how well your student and everybody's students are doing in math and English language arts. I don't care about your gun. Okay? That is not on the statewide assessment. So what this does, though, some of these laws do, is they protect against the questions that could be asked outside of state assessment, in addition to a state assessment. So I really encourage you to read these for yourself and make a determination on what else we could be doing as a state to protect student privacy. And then, again, because of your legislators in the room, one of the things that we are doing at the Department of Education is we are publishing, and you can find this right on our website. I think if you just go under privacy, you can find what we collect, the information that we collect, and what we're doing to protect that information, why we collect that information, and so on. So that's there as well. And then another bill that was passed, it was HB 206 of this past session. It's regarding non-academic surveys and questionnaires. And what that does is, well, two things really. It establishes a committee, a legislative committee, to study non-academic information collected by public schools. But it also requires school districts to develop a policy regarding that student participation in those. It requires that they let parents know when a non-academic survey is going to be sent out, and they give them at least 10 days to review that, review what the survey is before that goes out to parents. And we really think that that's a great bill to put through. The collection of personally identifiable information, if any of that comes through the department, through our systems that we have, is severely limited to what we can share. And anything that we report out is non-identifiable, it's cohort data, and it's aggregated. Okay, so what I can tell you is how, if you have more than 11 kids in 3rd grade in Northwood, then I can tell you the proficiency rate or the achievement level number for that school district, for Northwood. I can't tell you how Heather Gage did on the assessment, okay? So it's only aggregate data that we share. And that's all I have for the presentation, and I'd be thrilled to take any questions that you might have. Hello, Fred.
I hope I can speak if I'm not from Northwood. Is that okay?
Actually, we set the ground rules tonight that only residents from Northwood are allowed to speak.
We can talk after that. Absolutely.
Okay.
That'd be great. Come on, Northwood. Okay.
So I've seen a lot on Facebook and internet. So some of the things that keep coming up is, one, federal funds are tied to adapting the curriculum or adapting the standards and then doing our own tests.
Okay.
And the other one is that there are approved Common Core approved textbooks. Common Core admits that the curriculum is mediocre, but because Common Core is copywritten, the teachers have to follow it word by word.
Okay, let's do one at a time. I just forgot the first one. So don't leave. So when it comes to federal funds, there's a lot of confusion. I think I can pinpoint it to when Race to the Top funds came out. And that was part of the stimulus package back in, I can't remember. But so part of that package was to give grants or grants to state education agencies and governor's offices to help them with their reform efforts. New Hampshire did apply twice for that opportunity. We did not get it. But I encourage you to look on the U.S. Department of Ed's website and look at what it requires. And what it says is there's 2 columns that you can check in a Race to the Top application. Okay? One of those columns is that you've adopted standards that are similar to other states. Okay? The other column is we've adopted standards that have been reviewed and approved, I think is the wording of it, by institutes of higher education in your state. So states could choose either one of those in order to be competitive for that grant application. So there's that piece when it comes to the federal funding. We also hear too about our federal waiver. And again, the only thing that it requires is that we have college and career ready standards. What those are is completely, we have states that actually did not adopt the Common Core that have a federal waiver from different things. So keep going.
So we haven't lost any money?
No.
We won't lose any money?
No.
Based on
The only time when federal money is at, well, I mean, there's many times when it's at risk, but the conversations that we're having is if we determine that we were not going to implement the assessment, that there's no money tied to the Common Core. We have to have standards. We have, basically, if you get a grant and it tells you to make widgets, you got to make the widgets. So you have to, send the grant back, right? So what it tells us is that we have to have college and career ready standards, that we have to have an assessment. What we choose for those is completely up to the state.
So I have another question. What happens if we don't do well, or if our kids don't do well on the tests?
We have to provide more support to our students and our teachers.
And where does the money come from?
That's a good question. No, and you're right. I mean, but that would be what ECAP or NEAP that we did, 10 or 15 years ago. Any assessment, and it's the same. That's true if your school district is doing interim assessments. A popular one is NEWA. If whenever you get results back from an assessment, it's meant to inform instruction. And I will say that there was a question earlier, or a comment I think earlier about this. In New Hampshire, thank goodness, we don't have high stakes on our assessment. We don't. So when it comes to teacher evaluations, well, all we say in our waiver is that the state assessment has to be a consideration in your evaluation. But we strongly suggest it's not the only consideration. Now, we do know some districts who are using it as the only consideration, but that's inappropriate in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion. We don't, the performance that you do on your assessment is not how we allocate your funds to your district. Absolutely not. And first and foremost, unlike other states in the country, we do not use the statewide assessment to determine if a child will graduate. So there's no high stakes to our statewide assessment. It's purely there to help us understand how the educational system is doing, whether we're being adequate and equitable to our students, and it gives teachers and administrators in school districts as well as parents additional information about how their schools are doing.
Second, original question. I don't even know where this came from, but it's leaving it out there.
Sure.
It talks about Common Core admits that the curriculum is mediocre, but Common Core is copywritten. The teachers have to follow it word for word, and that there are Common Core textbooks.
Well, there are Common Core, tons of vendors, as anybody would expect, came out with Common Core approved, Common Core aligned, all of this. That's just part of the textbook industry. Okay, what we have always told folks, because we don't require instructional materials at the State Department in New Hampshire, what we basically told people is don't look at what that says. That shouldn't matter. It shouldn't have mattered what it didn't say. It shouldn't matter now. You should always look at the instructional material to see if it's going to help move your students forward.
So there is no Common Core approved curriculum. It's the standards, but what?
Not in New Hampshire. Correct. Correct. Absolutely.
We have time for 2 more quick questions.
I have 2.
Just blend them.
Really, I think you've answered my question. So Tim Jandenberg and Wall Street and Northwood. So you're assuring us, as I understand your discussion, that if we were to pick our own assessment and standards, we're not going to lose any money.
Not assessment. You still have to do the statewide assessment. That's required by state law.
Okay, so we have to do.
You have to do the assessment, but if you choose to develop your own standards, that's completely up to you.
So the assessment is as far as balance.
That's what we're currently using. We're looking at hopefully getting approval to use the SAT at 11th grade for next year and beyond, because we've just heard from so many people that that's the direction that they want to go.
But it certainly appears to school board members, or at least to this school board members, that whenever we look at curriculum, textbooks, etc., they're all aligning to Common
So
Core.
marketing thing.
I understand that, and I use that argument, and I agree with the argument, but even so, Smarter Balance testing is a certain style of testing that is different than the testing that we've had in the past.
Sure.
I think parents are going to be shocked in February, which is when we're told we're going to have some of the results.
Oh, no, parents will have them, probably August, maybe
What
the
did I
beginning of the
say?
school
I
year.
thought I said July.
Oh, February.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's when you used to go.
Going to that. So July, August is when we're going to get some results. And I think there's going to be a lot of sticker shock when that comes out. So
Right. I think the sticker shock comes with our innate desire to compare. And so we're going to want to compare the proficiency of one assessment that was designed on completely different standards and implemented in a completely different way to an assessment that's brand new standards, brand new, 5 or 6 years old, and administered a completely different way. We can't make the comparison between proficiency scores of VCAT and achievement level indicators in Smarter Balance. And that's going to be really hard for all of us, including me, not to make those comparisons. But you're correct, there's going to be sticker shock. And so we at the department are trying to put together some communication materials that we can talk to administrators about getting out there to parents. The commission is going to be putting a letter together that will go, hopefully, if we can get approval to do so, with school reports so that parents can understand where we're coming from when it comes to that and how we hope to support.
And so just to finalize, my main one is it comes up all the time. If we went with our own program, we're not going to lose any money.
You mean your own standards?
Yes.
No, sir. We will not lose money.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Absolutely.
To be fair to all of our presenters, we really have time for one more question, and then we need to move on.
Can you say name and address?
Yes, please.
Okay, Joy Hassler, Elmore Ridge Road. I wrote this down because I didn't want to jumble my words.
Sure.
Okay. So Common Core supporters and non-supporters have the same goal, and that is to ensure our children have a solid education which provides opportunity. So acknowledging that the Common Core tests are not perfect yet, what's the rush? I took the English and math one. Well, there's 50 days. And there was simple mistakes, kind of some numbers on the test were weirdly placed.
Okay.
If we took on our computers, or there would be weird misspellings, things like that.
Okay.
I'm just wondering why we're rushing to this when there's so much speculation. Maybe we should take our time.
When you say rush to do it, do you mean to just implement it as we go along?
Yeah, well, to mainly the tests. I understand
Yeah.
the standards mostly is the testing.
So one of the reasons why we want to continue to do it, forget about the feds and money and all that kind of stuff for a second, but one of the reasons why is because we want people to get used to what this assessment is. It's online, interactive, those kinds of things. Much different than the mobile test and VCAP, right? Did you experience VCAP as well? So two different tests. So we wanted people to have that experience in doing that. And being a very low stakes, no stakes state with that assessment, we felt, especially going into next year, because even accountability, I don't know if you've heard of priority and focus schools, but with that none of that will happen next year because it's the brand new assessment. So we'll still have the same priority and focus schools that we had last year, but we won't be identifying any new ones because of exactly what you just described, because we need people to really get their feet wet in it. So this year, it's just going to be baseline data. Here's where we started. Here's where we started. And we have full expectation, even with other states who have implemented their own assessments, they've seen growth every year because of that, because there's more experience with the standards, but also if they're implementing the standards, and there's also more experience in just the assessment. Thank you so much for bringing that. That's a great question, and we will look into some of those thoughts.
Thank you very much. Heather, thank you very much.
Okay.
Heather Gage from Education. The next speaker that we had a request to hear how Coe-Brown is implementing the Common Core. So we've got Headmaster Dave Smith from Coe-Brown Northwood Academy.
Thank you. That was great student input, by the way. We appreciate it. As you probably can tell from the color of my hair, We've gone through a lot of these cycles through the years in education. Seems like a few years ago, several now, there was institutionalized process that each SMU in the state of New Hampshire would develop their own set of standards. So we've come a long ways with a variety of cycles, but the same thing is important. Now, we're doing the best thing for our kids. That's why you're all here tonight on this beautiful summer evening, which we appreciate. So what are we doing at Coe-Brown? So we're not making judgment on this, it's an explanation of what we're doing and a little bit of perhaps why that you can see. Well, the State Department of Education, I appreciate Heather, the word you said earlier is some form or another, and that's what we're using in this, is some form or another. We're trying to take the good things and use the good things that we think will help our students and help the communities that we serve. So, for example, what we're doing, and if anybody really was excited and wanted to email me, I would send you a mapping. We map each class. That has been our goal. We've been working on this for a few years. And once again, trying to align our curriculum, how to make our curriculum better, how to make in each individual class match one another, how to develop dialogue within the curriculums to be sure that we're teaching what we need to be teaching without overlapping, et cetera, et cetera. So, for example, I just grabbed one that happened to be English. The big thing for us is it ties together our scope and sequence as well. So our scope and sequence is more or less the novels that we're teaching and how we're teaching it. And the big thing is that no one tells us, fortunately, how each teacher, we do not tell the teachers how to teach the class, but we do have standard curriculum parameters for each individual class. So, for example, what the Common Core has done, at least has helped us, and this has come after the competency issue. The state of New Hampshire requested that all high schools develop competencies for all their classes. So what we try to do that is to involve our teachers and not say, okay, you've got to do this, but how can we do this the best way possible that will help you, the teacher, and help the students at the academy. So the Common Core, for example, there's 4 types of learning targets: knowledge, reasoning, performance, and product. And probably the one area that the Common Core has emphasized is the reasoning part. That was probably a part that we needed to look more carefully at. The critical thinking, the reasoning part of the curriculum. And I do think that this has helped us pull that area together. The testing times, I think we've had to evaluate, the 9.5 hours of testing. Is that valid for students? Are we testing too much, too long? And I think individual communities have to do that. So if we're giving certain tests, this sort of balanced test, should we be not doing other tests, for example? So we all remember the No Child Left Behind and the kneecap testing that just left us. In 2014, the government, us by the way, the government said that all students graduating high school should be at grade level. Well, we know that's not the case, but we still like to make that the case. So it's kind of a bar for us, and it's been a bar that's caused us to stretch and work with your communities, including the Northwood School District. So, for example, we put into place 9th grade reading level as a minimum standard of graduation expectation. We've increased that now. Just recently, it's grade 10.5. Now, we still want to have grade level be our goal, but we're trying to do it with, and that's the students' input is we're trying not to do it too fast and trying to do it accordingly with the programs in the middle schools and what we can do for support at the high school to make it eventually that all students would be able to graduate at grade level. And that puts into the career readiness part of it deals with, for example, this past class of 2015, 86% of the class is going on either to a 2-year school, 4-year school, military, or some other type of special program. But that means it's 14% of the students. Are we doing enough for those students? You know, are we preparing them to be career ready for their step into the job force? So this has, you know, focused us into looking at these specific areas. So, if you have any questions about what's happening, don't hesitate to shoot me an email at the Academy. Be very happy to share curriculum concerns with you, but I appreciate a few minutes with you tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Superintendent, you entertain a few questions?
Sure. Okay, you got 3 minutes left.
3 minutes. Thank you. I got a couple. Just framed around what you said. One is, now that could you give me an idea of what the curriculum, or let's just call it curriculum. I have a problem with that, I've heard this before, as it is defined, because I think it's somewhat incorrect. Except for one. Bill Gage thinks it's incorrect also. That's very clear. That is the use of the word curriculum, which you use it, is not how he uses it. But just to say how in the curriculum, the reason, pedagogical technique, or whatever it is, what is it you mentioned that Common Core helped you in the implementation of whatever reason in the curriculum? So I would like to ask you that. If you want to tackle that, I just want to follow up with something.
Sure. I'm not sure that it gave us the answers to it, but it put on the table the areas that we need to consider to make the total curriculum. So, for example, reasoning related to English language arts, thinking skills, using one's knowledge to solve a problem, making a decision. Students must have thinking proficiencies. Those types of skills, and that's why the test that was recently given is certainly a different test than ECAM. So as opposed to standard questions, answers, rote memorization, it's asking how to solve a problem solving. So 3 students could, on their first day at work, would have the ability to be able to work together and to develop a solution to that particular problem. Those would be the parameters of this type of curriculum in reasoning anyway. Whereas the other areas, performance, targets, for example, would be just the basic collecting information from reading in order to fill out information. Basic things of that nature. Then product targets, being able to display the knowledge of that curriculum. How can I display it in some type of, whether it be hands-on type of project, to demonstrate that I have an understanding of that curriculum.
All right. I can ask more about that, but that interests me now. Pursuit of that is being carried out. Gives me a little idea. This is, I guess, I'm going to just put you since I just referred to that. This is something, and you seem to, and I'm taking you to your presentation, you seem to have, genuinely believe that to be what you think, that you have some flexibility going forward.
Correct.
In regard to your integration with
Yes.
Common Core. Here's a quote. We will only know if the effort has succeeded when the curriculum and the tests are aligned to these standards. Bill Gates, who said that, was referring to the Common Core curriculum, which was, as we had already explained to us, and is in just eminently clear to anybody who wants to take a look at it. There's a secret process of design in terms of the future curriculum. Most people have no idea, including you, Mr. Superintendent, including you, have no idea what is really there. As Dr. Stotsky explained, much of it is in computers stored away that you have no access to, you have no access to, I have no access to.
Could you please state your question?
Yeah, so having said what I just said about Bill Gates, curriculum and tests are aligned to these standards. He says we will not know if this works, and in a separate statement he said it's going to take at least 10 years. So your children are guinea pigs for the next 10 years. That's what that means if you want to read the Summer language. That's what Bill Gates says. You can see him saying it, not making this up. It's coming out of his mouth as he sits in a formal forum declaring these things. So I say to you that if you really feel confident that you have as much rights as when this is what the guy who's pushing this at $6 billion.
Right. I certainly understand that, but I do feel that we have that flexibility because we're not looking at everything for that one test. That's just one small part of it. We're looking more importantly to the entire curriculum. No different than when we give a reading test to see if John and Sally are ready to graduate. That one test cannot be the only thing that determines their graduation.
And following that, but if the test requires you to meet a curriculum standard, then you will be teaching that standard. You will be teaching that curriculum in order for the students to pass the test. This is a very simple, logical relationship, and this is what is being required by the Common Core designers. And if you listen to the man who's now...
We've heard your comment. Can we have one more question, please, because we need to really move on.
David Coleman, look him up. He's now designing, he's at comprehensive board exams. He's designing those. He was the head guy at the Common Core. He was the head architect.
I just have a quick question. I was just curious, I know Coe-Brown's going to be private. If parents who have their children in Coe-Brown, if they want to opt their children out as part of balance testing, is that any different than doing it in a public school? I've heard mixed things on this issue.
No, we would listen to their reasoning for that. We'd listen to their reasoning. I think we would encourage it because this is only one small test. You know, I hope that we don't get weighed down on the testing part of it. The Common Core deals with the entire curriculum in the math and English area and how it relates to other classes as well. So to me, that's significant. The only thing is if people didn't take the test, right, and the state allowed for a lot of people not to take the test, then that's going to affect the quality of the results, obviously.
Okay, so if I had a student at Coe-Brown and I asked to have them not take the test, you would not?
We would listen to your reasoning. Yeah. We might try to tell you what the purpose of the test was, and maybe it would be beneficial because of this, and then it would ultimately be your decision. You're welcome. Am I done? All right. All right. Thank you all.
Part of the conversation, as we said at the beginning, is that we have to have standards in place. Whether they're state standards or locally developed standards, and Manchester decided to not do the state standards and develop their own. So we've got Selma Naccach-Hoff who will speak to that and let us know a little bit about the process of what Manchester went through.
Thank you very much. I welcome the opportunity to speak to you about what we've done. My background is very simple. I'm an educator. I teach. That's what I've done my entire professional career. And that's over 30 years. I won't go into specifics. But during that time, I've taught English at Manchester High School Central. And I'm, for the last several years, been the department head. However, over my career, I have been working with standards and curriculum, and I know that nomenclature may be a problem, but the bottom line is that all of us in education and all of you here want one thing, and that is what is best for our students. How can we help them to succeed? How can we give them the skills so that they can become functioning adults in a very diverse society? And certainly there are many ways to do that. Now I think if we look back a bit and thought about how we were taught, and some of us might say, boy, those were simple days. Why don't we just go back to that? But I would also submit, is our world, is our society the same as it was 40 or 50 years ago? It's not. And so we have to adapt to a world that's changing, and we have to make sure that our students, your children, my students, have the requisite skills to succeed. In Manchester, as you heard, we did not adopt the Common Core per se, but I should also say that we have always had standards. The state of New Hampshire has always had standards, New Hampshire frameworks, the GSEs, the GLEs, and for years I've worked on various iterations of standards for our community. These are not new. Our teachers are versed in standards. Our students understand that they have to accomplish certain things. We give them flexibility in how they get to that point. We aren't all learning in the same way. Teachers don't teach in the same way, but we do have standards which our students must and do meet. What we did in Manchester was really very energizing. It was very energizing for the group of teachers with whom I had the pleasure of working. We gathered, I'm speaking specifically about English language arts because that's what I know. The math people did much the same. We met through the course of the entire year. We listened, we read, we thought about what we do, and then we thought about how we can do it better. And so we looked at the Common Core. We used some of the Common Core, probably a little less than a third, was borrowed from the Common Core. We looked at standards from across the country. We looked at those developed by Dr. Stotsky, and we adapted. We adopted, and we came to what we have, which, some might say is a hodgepodge. But again, I would also say that in English, reading, writing, speaking, communicating, these are the basic skills. They haven't changed. Are we all reading something differently from what we read 50 years ago? Yes. Is there validity in what we read 50 years ago? Yes. So we need to combine all of that. We looked at making certain that our standards were that they were not curriculum, that they were not prescribed reading pieces, works. We did give examples if we thought that the standard was not going to be as understood by most of the average person. We gave examples of what we meant, but we didn't prescribe any particular set of works. There's a great broad range, and I say that too because it's important that some students like a particular area, and they will learn from, let's say, mythology. I've taught that for many years. It's a reading course, and in that we have read over the years the Iliad and the Aeneid. And this is for a very heterogeneous group of young men and women. But they appreciate and understand the value of what they're doing, but they think in some way that they're kind of fooling us because it's not really reading if you're enjoying it. And so we looked at making certain that we had a broad range of things from which we could teach our young men and women. So that's what we did. We made certain, again, that the teachers would have flexibility in terms of instruction. We're very aware of testing that is part of our lives. It's not something we can question because it's there. But we did make one significant change, I would say, from the Common Core, and that was to define informational text from nonfiction. It seems very simple, but we decided in English Language Arts that we would do the reading that is the corpus, including the classics and Aristotelian tragedy. And yes, it's been in our curriculum for many, 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 many years. It's not new. But we also felt that even though it says English Language Arts and Math, that the whole school, all disciplines, needed to be part of this discussion, needed to be part of educating our young men and women. And so this affords us a wonderful opportunity to look at a spoken sequence, as you heard, but not just in these two areas. So even though the Social Studies Department or the Science Department are not so conditioned to be part of the test, this kind of testing, we're looking to them to support our students. So if there is on the test, which there are, and the Smarter Balance was certain, and the SATs and the PSATs, and I'll address what we did with that in a moment, we are asking them to reinforce the reading skills in the material that they have. The same kind of reading skills. They aren't critical reading, certainly, but our students have to know to look for certain things, even if the language might be different or foreign to them. So that's been a very energizing thing for Manchester, sort of getting us all together, working towards that same goal rather than in fragmented parts. We haven't gotten the result of the Smarter Balance testing, but it's the first time. We do know that the SATs and the PSATs are moving again away from what they've been for the last several years, and they too will be incorporating in the English part readings and writing from the other disciplines. So there will be informational reading, and that's the College Board. It's an icon. It's not something that, you know, a grassroots organization or Manchester can say, change it because it's not meeting what our community needs. So all in all, we have had a wonderful experience. We've not, you know, thrown the baby out with the bathwater or anything like that. We've gotten our basics. We know where our students need to go, and we're hoping that, and hopeful that in each year we will become more attuned to how best to work with these standards and to make our students both accountable and successful. And our standards are on our district website. You are very, please look at them and do with them what you would. So I thank you for the opportunity, and I thank you for your concern about the young men and women in your community, because after all, they are our future. Thank you. Which I'd be delighted to do.
I'm curious, how many people were involved in the creation of the rewrite of your standards? How many people?
Okay.
What kinds of people? How long did it take? And what compensation, if any, was offered to people who are, as you are, a teacher in the school?
Okay, I'll start with that last one because that's the easiest, because it's always the same. There is no compensation beyond what we get for doing the work that we love to do. And that, to me, frankly, is compensation enough. So there was no compensatory element to this. We worked for a year, a school year, from September to the end of May. And it was we were divided into elementary, middle, and high school. And there were about 12 of us in each area. I think the elementary included the preschool too, so they may have been more. And it was, as I said, teachers, and we did, I think that's it. Was there another aspect to your question? I'm sorry.
Well, did you have then, you had 3 groups of people working for a year, about 12 people in each group. Did you have a math?
Yes.
Over here, so you got 36, math is correct, you have 36 people in English language arts, and you had 36 people in math, so it was split between elementary, middle school, and high school.
About that. I'm not the math person either, so I'm just looking around the table and remembering. It wasn't a week, it was about twice a month. And then we had homework, because we are teachers, we also had homework. Yes, it was a day long. So I guess if there was compensation, it was that release time. It was a professional day, if you will. And it was very energizing because all of us were in both the math and the English. We're in a room like this. We each had our areas. And what was so wonderful about it is that we could talk with one another. So the high school wasn't working in isolation from the middle school or the preschool. So we went back to one another and we said, okay, are you going to do this component? And then how can we support you moving forward? Or what support do you need from the lower graders?
How were you led to facilitate?
I think we were given a direction, and each group sort of had a facilitator, and I guess that would be I for the high school. And as I said, each group had some. There were reading specialists in the lower grades, and they
was all teachers.
Absolutely.
Did you then present this to parents and other teachers?
We yes, at each iteration, we brought material back to our schools. We met with our departments. We got input from every teacher who was teaching, either in English or in math. We also let the school know that the direction we were taking, because it meant that they needed to be on board as well. The other disciplines, social studies and science, they needed to pick up some of this. The onus was not just going to be on English. It was indeed, under the direction of the district superintendent and assistant superintendent. Okay, thank you very much.
First of all, I'd like to, again, thank all of our speakers for coming tonight. They all volunteered to be here on a beautiful evening and spend their time with us, so can we give them one more round of applause? Now, with that, the school board obviously has a lot of discussions to have and some decisions to make. That'll be on a future board agenda for further discussion. At this point, we do have a few minutes left. Are there all of this information, the speakers, the information that the speakers presented tonight, your public comments, all of that is being listened to and brought back to the school board for further consideration. We do have a few minutes left. Are there any other residents in Northwood that would like to make a comment?
I'm Julie LeBeau, and I'm from Northwood. I'm on my road. And my concern is, I've done a lot of research. I have kids that have been in this school for 11 years. I've had a kid in this school
You get
for
just a
11
little
years.
closer to the mic.
I've had a kid in this school for 11 years. And I have no problem with standards whatsoever. The problem that I have is when you connect everything together, when you connect the testing, the Common Core standards that were developed, the beliefs of people who developed them, what they intended for curriculum to follow. all of them. The Smarter Balance test is developed by those people, the target developed by those groups of people. They all have the same plan in mind. The the materials that I've seen purchased, at least in our school, are from specific people that are Common Core related only, and the quality of them has gone down tremendously in the 2-year period. That's my concern, is that when you connect all the dots, you put all the pieces of the puzzle together. I cannot see how this is improved at all. I can't see it. And that's what I keep begging for, is for someone to show me how this is better. Because I don't see it. My husband's a lawyer. I've gone through college. We're professional people. We have a kid in college. We have kids going through this. I have a good, broad perspective. Show me how it's better.
If you're interested in what national schools have gone through with this, it's all there. Another question I have is, yes, our world is fast paced. There's no doubt about it. We have more technology and everything else about that. But our children are still developing the same way. And I'm more familiar with elementary school level, and I'm very, very disappointed when I see this. And you can say it's not curriculum, but it's just standard, but when these publishers are publishing tests, and it's so convoluted, it's so developmental and appropriate for the younger ones. And therefore, they want, and the teachers, it's all going to be on their shoulders to break up this, to be able to explain this convoluted stuff to get to the kids' level. And she's shaking her head over there, so thank you. Okay, that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. This is obviously, and I hope it's not obviously, this is a very big subject. It actually needs, I think, a lot more discussion. Dr. Stotsky made a very valid appraisal saying that we should have been talking about this for the previous 6 years. That wasn't available to us to talk about at that time, but that's the kind of time frame that it is something along that line that's legitimate to consider something that is changing the nature and the future of education in America. And some don't think, oh, be dismissed, oh no. Yes, it is. And if you don't know that, then you haven't paid much attention. I'm just asserting that. So, having said that, I would like to suggest to the school board, to you, Dr. Stotsky, that perhaps there be not only future discussions in whatever opportunities that present themselves in the course of, let's say, this year, coming year, but I would suggest something along the line of a debate format. It is an academic debate format. That is where you have presenters, as we did here today. And thank you again to all the people who came, that were willing to, for presenters that took the time. But it should be that, as if anybody's familiar with the standard debate format, you have presenters, and then you have them interlocate, talk to each other a bit, and ask each other critical questions, because these are people that know more than we do about the subject generally, and can ask each other intelligent questions. And that is very enlightening to an uninformed audience. And I think that's the way future effort should go forth. Then the audience can come in at the end and ask some additional questions after they've heard some intelligent debate. I think this is so critical. I'm sorry to see, but maybe, just good excuses. I did talk to some parents that couldn't make it tonight for reasons, but this is just an extremely important subject which should be pursued. The future of your children's education. I don't know. Nothing else. Maybe what are we going to have for pizza tonight? That would equal that or something. How about giving that a little bit of consideration? Thank you.
Thank you.
One more quick question, and that is for the response that we have from the Department And my question is, just has the Smarter Balance Assessment been validated? If so, from whom?
So there are teams of hundreds of people, hundreds of folks that were engaged in the development of the Smarter Balance Assessment. There's two validation processes that happen with any assessment that you do. One, you validate it based on the actual questions that are being asked, and are they valid questions based on what we want to learn about that student's skills and knowledge, okay? That has been validated with the Smarter Balance Assessment. Then there's the other part, is when we're making the claim that this assessment will help us understand if students are ready to be college and career ready. You know, when we see the score, we're saying that our claim is that by how the student did on the 11th grade assessment or 3rd grade assessment, they're on the right track for college and career. We first have to get them into college and career to be able to understand that. So that validation process on the second side of it, even though the test has been validated for the questions that we're asking, we want to make sure that we do both validation processes. So the assessment is validated, but our assumptions on where it's going, we need to continue to research and study that. That's with every assessment that you do, whether it's local or state.
And who validates the assessment, or who has validated? You said hundreds of people.
Well, there's hundreds of people. Well, and I can't actually give you names. I would have to look up the names. I don't know them personally. But there's, so for example, actually I do know one person that worked on it. Our director of assessment at our Department of Education served on the governance team for Smarter Balance, as well as many other folks. But if you, before you leave, if you give me an email, I can send you the link to find out exactly how everything was designed, developed, validated, and so forth. Yeah, absolutely.
Tom Chase again. I want to pick up three things that I've learned in the last little while. One was Dr. Stotsky talking about how at the grade 2 and 3 level, kids are required to work on essay writing. And she made the assertion that essay writing for 2nd and 3rd graders is developmentally inappropriate. So that's a very specific question that I would want to follow up with the Manchester folks and see whether the educators of the 2nd and 3rd graders thought that essay writing was inappropriate developmentally and did something else in that area. So that's one thing that I found out about. Another thing I found out was having dinner with a kid I went to school with from kindergarten through college, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it, 18 years together. And he became a child developmental specialist. He's a professor at Tufts University in child development. And as part of our long dinner with Andre conversation, I asked him, so what about Common Core? And he said, the thing that troubles me is there was not a child development expert or 2 or 3 or 4 involved in the writing of those standards. So it may not therefore be surprising that the writing of essays for 2nd and 3rd graders, which seems like a great idea, had crept into this standard. The other person I talked to, a lot of the people in this room may know, is Karen Anderson at Center School, producer of valedictorians, if you ask Karen. And I spoke to her briefly about Common Core, and again, her focus was on the inappropriateness, in her view, of some of the standards that have been developed for the very young children. I personally am less concerned about teenagers. I think they're in good hands with David Smith and Coe-Brown, personally. But I'm very concerned about early child education. As many of you know, for my efforts to get this town to devote the money necessary to provide all-day kindergarten for our children. And so I would encourage you to look at those early child standards and keep an eye on that if you're going to make them more developmentally appropriate.
Thank you. Well, with that, I would just, again, like to say thank you very much, not only for our speakers, but for you taking the time to come out. This is, I don't think there is a right or wrong answer to this, but certainly having discussions on standards is always a healthy discussion. So thank you very much for coming tonight.